So I just finished Ultraman Rising, and I gotta say, I really didn't know what to expect when I hit play. But let's face it, American adaptations of Japanese properties typically haven't fared well. However, the live-action One Piece show proved to be a rare exception to the rule. But when I say I didn't know what to expect, it's not because of that rule, but because I only had a passing interest in the Ultraman series. I've never been a huge fan of tokusatsu, but I do love Kaiju movies, so I've always made it a point to see some of the Ultraman series, seeing as how Tsuburaya is a legendary effects artist, especially when it comes to his work on the OG Godzilla films. To be honest, I only really knew of Ultraman through more of a side series, and an American adaptation at that, Superhuman Samurai Cyber Squad, which was DiC's attempt at replicating Saban's success with Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. Superhuman Samurai Cyber Squad used footage from Gridman the Hyper Agent, matched it with footage shot here in America to make a hybrid show suited for American audiences. Gridman the Hyper Agent is only tangentially related to Ultraman, it being another Tsuburaya production and sharing some design philosophies, as well as an identical transformation sequence. Aside from that, I was also pretty enamored with the CGI animated show of 2019 when it premiered on Netflix. It also shares some story elements with Ultraman Rising. So Ultraman Rising is a CG animated feature-length family film designed to really make the character of Ultraman a household name here in the West. Aesthetically, it's another Spider-Verse clone featuring a similar art style but not quite as polished, and here I am, one video later talking about Spider-Man again. But we've been seeing a lot of CG animated films trying to replicate that look, like DreamWorks with the last Puss in Boots film, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem, and even Kid Cudi's Intergalactic, all doing their best to capture what makes those Spider-Verse films so visually appealing. Ultraman falls short of achieving that eclectic look, but it has its own visual charm, particularly helped by a fantastic color palette, especially the neons. Ultraman Rising centers around Sato Kenji, the son of the original Ultraman. Kenji recounts to us via flashback that one night while watching baseball with his parents, the Kaiju alert goes off, signaling Kenji's father, Professor Hayao Sato, into battle. Professor Ondo then calls and informs Hayao that the attacking Kaiju is Gigantron, one of the most dangerous Kaiju, and is headed straight towards Sato's family. It is implied that the battle was particularly dangerous because the very next scene cuts to 20 years later. Kenji is listening to a voicemail from his father, who apologizes to Kenji for disrupting his life. We learn that Kenji was sent to live in the US, and while there, Kenji grew up to become a fantastic baseball player who played for the LA Dodgers, who were on the verge of a championship when he seemingly out of the blue announced his return to Japan, and that he will be playing for the Giants, based off the real-life Japanese team, the Yomiuri Giants. Kenji, or Ken as he chooses to be called, has become arrogant due to his time living in the US. During the presser where he announces the move, he's very full of himself, actively calling himself the best baseball player alive. Based on the voicemail left by Hayao, he and Kenji seem to have grown distant over the last 2 years, but the true reason for Kenji's return is because the mantle of Ultraman has been passed to him. While Kenji may be an amazing baseball player, he's a terrible Ultraman, and when we see him engaged in a Kaiju battle, he is actively getting his ass kicked. Not only that, but there's a lot of collateral damage in the city since Kenji is not actively seeking ways to move the fight away from the city. During the battle, Kenji is injured and is about to lose access to his Ultraman form as the stress of the battle is taking its toll on him, and we're going to talk more about this a little bit later. Before the Kaiju can finish him, the Kaiju Defense Force, or KDF, arrives on the scene and restrains the monster. Kenji takes this opportunity to leave and let the KDF handle the Kaiju. Hayao, who was watching the battle on the news, urges Kenji to return to the battlefield because the KDF is going to exterminate the Kaiju. Not only that, but they aren't opposed to doing so using extreme force. A short time later, it's time for Kenji's Japanese baseball debut, and during his first at-bat, he is struggling due to the injury he sustained during his battle as Ultraman. Simultaneously, the KDF is transporting a containment sphere, but traveling behind them is an extremely large flying Kaiju following at a distance. Back at the Tokyo Dome, Kenji switches to a right-handed stance and gets a grand slam home run, and that's when it happens. The Kaiju attacks the KDF with the goal of getting the spear away from them. The attack leads to the Tokyo Dome, and everyone clears out. Kenji goes Ultraman and begins to fight with the Kaiju, which turns out to be Gigantron, the same Kaiju his father fought 20 years earlier. But with the KDF on site, it's a three-way battle. Gigantron manages to retrieve the spear and flees. Ultraman, fearful that the KDF will kill her, follows and attempts to protect the Kaiju. But the KDF uses missiles to kill the beast. As the Kaiju lays dying, it desperately tries to get closer to the sphere. It wraps itself around it and then dies. Ultraman approaches the sphere and it opens, revealing that it was holding Gigantron's egg. She was a mother defending her child, and she paid the ultimate price for it. Ultraman retrieves the egg and it hatches. The baby inside immediately imprints on Kenji's version of Ultraman. Kenji takes the egg back to his home, a mansion that doubles as a secret Ultraman base, and the baby is placed in a containment tank until Kenji can figure out what to do with it. Kenji's father also shows up, and it is here we see how far these two men have drifted apart. Hayao scolds Kenji for letting the kaiju, which he believes to be the last of its kind, die, and Kenji snaps back that his dad should have been more concerned with his son's well-being, accusing Hayao of loving the city more than him and resenting him for the injury that led to Hayao's retirement, which forced Kenji to become Ultraman. Hayao leaves heartbroken, realizing that the relationship with his son may be irreparable. From here, the movie goes into the standard animated family film fare. Comedy hijinks ensue, and they take a toll on Kenji's personal life, especially his baseball career. He sinks so low that his coach threatens to trade him. As Kenji struggles to be a father to the baby, 71 days pass, and Kenji has made no real progression with the child. In a moment of pure desperation, he calls a reporter, Ami Wakita. Earlier in the film, she tried to have an interview with Kenji, which was interrupted by her daughter, who, by the way, is a huge Ultraman fangirl. For the most part, Kenji has done what he can to avoid Ami, as the questions she likes to ask him cut deep into his unresolved parental issues. But now that he's found himself in the role of an unwitting single father, he needs help, especially from someone who shares the experience of being a single parent. Ami provides Kenji with the encouragement he needs, and immediately, Kenji bonds with his daughter through a mutual love of baseball. In the background, the KDF searches across Japan looking for the creature that hatched from the egg. The following day, Kenji goes on a date/interview with Ami, but the baby kaiju has a case of acid reflux, which unlocks its atomic breath. The baby escapes and begins looking across Tokyo for Kenji. To the citizens of Tokyo, this looks like a kaiju rampage, and the KDF is alerted and pursues her. Kenji realizes she has left the safety of the base and goes out looking for her. He finds her at Tokyo Tower, where she's being attacked by the KDF led by Professor Ando. The KDF manages to trank her. She begins to fall. As she falls, Kenji in his Ultraman form catches her by the arm, but because she's still an infant, her arm breaks. An enraged Kenji takes the baby and flees. Once they arrive back at the base, Kenji realizes he needs the help of a kaiju expert, so he calls the one person he knows will come, his father. When Hayao arrives, they do basic first aid on the baby, setting its arm and giving it some tranquilizers to help it sleep. While this is happening, we learn why Professor Anjo, a man of science, would have such a vendetta against kaiju. The night Hayao fight Gigantron, Anjo lost his family due to the destructiveness of the battle, and his plan is to use the baby to find Kaiju Island and nuke it off the map, ridding the world of kaiju forever. Back at the Ultra base, the Ultramen realize they need to teach Emi, the baby kaiju now named after Kenji's mother, how to be a proper kaiju. And through the power of montage, Emi and Kenji begin to learn, Emi learning to be a better kaiju, and Kenji being a more mature person, which leads him to getting his career back on track and repairing his relationship with Hayao. While on a family trip, the two men bond over the memory of Kenji's mother, who is presumed dead after an unexplained event, presumably a kaiju attack. After some playtime, Emi's body prepares to undergo an evolution and she cocoons herself, but the timing couldn't be worse, as they are discovered by the KDF, who launches a full-scale attack on the family, and during that attack, Hayao is injured and goes unconscious. A tracker is placed on Emi's cocoon, and Kenji barely manages to get them back to the Ultra base, but they aren't safe there, as the KDF soon finds them and attacks again, this time using the roboticized corpse of Gigantron. This attack presumably kills Hayao, and Emi, recognizing her true mother's voice, goes to Gigantron and begins to lead her and the KDF to Kaiju Island. After a pep talk from his dying AI, Ultraman springs into action and begins to battle Mecha Gigantron. A conflicted Emi, who's watching as her parental figures fight, gets caught in the crossfire, knocking her unconscious. This enrages Kenji and he begins to attack, ripping pieces of the armor off the kaiju. He's about to go for the kill when he sees a piece of exposed flesh. He realizes that the kaiju is still there underneath all that armor and is still alive. The stress of this realization causes Kenji's color timer to go off and he reverts back to his human form, falls into the ocean and starts to sink to his death. As he does, we flash back to 20 years ago to the attack that led to Hayao sending his family away. He managed to save his family that night, but right now, it seems that Kenji is ready to accept his death until Hayao shows up as Ultraman and saves him. Enraged by seeing another Ultra, Ando demands that Mecha Gigantron kill them both, but Emi manages to communicate with her mother, which allows the real Gigantron to emerge from within, freeing herself from the KDF's control. Ando calls for the evacuation of the KDF ship, which then transforms into a freaking Pacific Rim-style Jaeger. The two Ultramen resolve to fight together, and Kenji undergoes the most earned transformation sequence in the entire film, one that calls back to the original 1966 transformation sequence. After a pretty decent fight scene involving all 5 giants, Ando activates a self-destruct sequence designed to take everyone out. Kenji takes a good long look at his family and rushes towards Ando's Jaeger and activates his force field. The Jaeger explodes and we see Emi cry out for Kenji as we fade to white. When the screen cuts back, we see that Kenji survived, albeit he is injured, but now he's given Ami a real interview on camera, and he plays for her a voicemail left to him by his mom. As the voicemail plays, we cut to the Ultra family, as the 4 of them, Emi, Gigantron, and the 2 Ultramen make their way to Monster Island. And that's the film. Now, there is a mid-credit scene, but you guys have to watch that for yourselves. Now, while the plot of the film isn't groundbreaking, I will say that I like the way they explore the notion of family versus found family. Typically, when a movie explores those themes, they try to cement the found family as the better of the two, but this movie takes those 2 types of family and blends them together so that by the end of the film, the 2 families are one. Another thing I like about the film is that Hayao isn't actually a bad father. It's Kenji's misinterpretation of Hayao's choices as a father that breeds the conflict between the 2 men. Hayao always had Kenji's best interest at heart, but the chip on Kenji's shoulder that he developed while living in the US prevents them from coming together. It's only through their efforts to be a good father and grandfather to Emi that Kenji starts to become more humble and he and his father can begin bonding again. In other words, Kenji is a flawed protagonist and this humanizes him. Another thing I love about the film, that it's not afraid of its Japanese roots. It's set in Japan, the locations are real locations in Japan, and like I said earlier, Kenji plays for a baseball team called the Yomori Giants, and their logos are perfectly recreated on the team's uniforms. The news reports are from NHK, and you see tons of references to other Japanese properties. There's a blink and you'll miss it moment when Emi dances, and the dance itself is a recreation of Godzilla's dance from the film Godzilla vs. Monster Zero. But the best part of the film is that all the characters are Japanese. This is an American production. It would be easy for them to go the Monsterverse route and make all the characters American, but they didn't. They gave Kenji dual citizenship and left it at that. Lastly, the casting is comprised of mainly Japanese American actors. There is no part of this film that doesn't pay respect to its culture. Initially, the film wasn't supposed to be an Ultraman film. It was inspired by tokusatsu, but writer-director Shannon Tyndall said that it leaned more into the Super Sentai side of it, and it was only through the influence of Netflix that it became an Ultraman film. To be honest, you can kind of see that it wasn't always designed to be Ultraman. The subtle changes to the lore, like the color timer being activated during moments of emotional duress, so the more stressed Kenji is, the more likely he is to drop out of the transformation. In the original series, the transformation is limited to 3 minutes. The activation of the color timer is to let the hero know that if the battle doesn't end soon, he will drop out of the Ultraman form and can thus be easily killed by a kaiju without the protection of the transformation. Another change is both Ultramen show compassion towards the kaiju they battle, opting not to kill them if they had the choice. Lastly, this film doesn't actually use the OG Ultraman Shin Hayata. Instead, they choose to name him Hayao Sato, freeing themselves of having to cope with the character's legacy. None of these changes make this a bad film. I liked it a lot, and it's an easy entry point into the Ultraman franchise that doesn't disrespect its source material, but makes enough adaptations to make it more viable in the West. The franchise needed something like this if we're being honest. While Super Sentai has managed to find life here in the US through Power Rangers, attempts at adapting Ultraman for Western audiences haven't done nearly as well. Superhuman Samurai Cyber Squad is the closest they got, and like I said in the beginning of the video, that's really not Ultraman, it's more of a spin-off. I want to close this video by saying that it's not a coincidence that Netflix dropped this film on Father's Day weekend. It is a movie that begs for fathers to sit down with their kids and watch together. It's an opportunity for bonding. Regretfully, I didn't watch this with my dad, but as soon as it was over, I called him and told him that he had to watch it. When I saw him today on Father's Day, the day I'm recording this video, I asked him how he liked the movie. He loved it. We talked about it for half an hour. And that's why you should watch ULTRAMAN Rising. Alright guys, that's gonna wrap this one up, but please remember to follow me on all my socials where I'm posting all the nerd shit I come across in real time. If you liked today's video, please hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit that bell icon to get notified whenever a new video drops. There's a lot of cool stuff I want to talk about with you guys, so I'll see you soon.